My favorite illustrations all have one thing in common. It's the backgrounds. From incredibly detailed to beautifully simple, they invite the viewer to immerse themselves in their worlds and be part of the story. Then there are my illustrations. They're not terrible, but they do look dull and lifeless. So for the past couple of months, I set out to change that. And here are the results of my practice. In today's video, I want to share with you the things I learned and simple methods I used to improve at drawing backgrounds. I will be focusing mainly on geometric backgrounds rather than organic ones, but I believe it will be helpful either way. Let's get into it. When I first started drawing, I focused only on characters and saw backgrounds as an afterthought, and of course my art reflected that, with flat colors and random backgrounds. The question was always, what background fits this character? But that's the wrong approach. Instead of thinking in terms of backgrounds, we need to start thinking in terms of environments. The environment isn't just something behind the character, it's part of the concept from the very beginning and has as much importance as the character. Even though most illustrations will have the character as the focal point, the environment really does all the heavy lifting in making it interesting and telling the story. This is because environments have a huge storytelling potential. For example, look at these two environments. Even if we place the same character in both, the mood will be completely different. Of course, lighting plays a huge role in that as well, but the design of the environment is just as important. Even the tiny details can say so much about the story and enrich the illustration. That's why the shift from background to environment is crucial. You could call it a shift in perspective. If you look at this illustration, it may seem really complicated, and that's somewhat true. It's full of tiny details that probably took hours to draw and paint. But if you break it down, you'll find that below all of that is just a composition of boxes. And at its core, every environment can be simplified like that. So we need to be able to draw boxes and other simple shapes. That of course means that the first thing you need to study is perspective. Perspective is hard and tedious, but there's no way around it. I tried to avoid it for the longest time, and because of that, my drawings always looked kind of mediocre. But once I finally put in the effort, it was the single biggest improvement in my art. You'd be surprised how much just simple perspective can change your artwork. Here are some of my early practice sketches, and while the perspective isn't perfect, you can see the environment starting to come to life. And with a lot of patience and more practice, I was able to draw scenes like this with ink on paper. It's all about the process of having a solid foundation in perspective and slowly building up the details. I won't be explaining perspective in this video, as there are plenty of videos explaining it way better than I would, but I want to urge you to actually start practicing it. It will definitely be worth it. I'll link the resources I found to be helpful in the description. But the most practical and one I would recommend is Drawbox. It's hard but very straightforward and has tons of hands-on practice. So if that's how you prefer to study, then go check it out. Once you can draw boxes in perspective, the next step is learning how to organize them. That's composition. The best way I've found to study composition is by looking at other artists, but not just illustrators. Photography and cinematography are also amazing for this. You can take a scene you like and break it down into simple shapes. This will train your eye to see below all the details and get to the underlying structure. And once you have that, you can rebuild that composition with your own ideas. Take this as an example. This artist turned this very simple picture of just some household items into a full-on fantasy illustration. And here's another example by the same artist. It's absolutely fascinating, because it shows you that composition is more about the abstract placement and framing rather than about the specific details. You can also practice composition by doing quick thumbnails. Thumbnails help you get the basic composition down without spending much time. This means that you can sketch around and start intuitively finding out what works out and what doesn't. I'll link some resources regarding this subject as well. Another trick you can use is playing with basic 3D blockouts and panning around to find the right shot. The goal of the blockout is just to play with the framing of the object, so it really can be as basic as you want it to be. Here's an example of how I used this very messy blockout in Blender and turned it into this drawing. And here's a more simple example that turned into this illustration. And of course, composition isn't just about looking nice, it's also about storytelling. For example, if you're drawing a fight scene, placing the camera next to the character's shoulders makes it feel as if we're viewing the scene from the character's POV. This immerses the viewers and heightens the tension. If you're going for a calm mood, you might want to focus more on the environment, with the character taking up less of the composition. It's important to keep that in mind while planning your composition. Values are also very essential for a good composition. I won't go too deep into that here, since this video is about drawing, not painting. But always keep in mind that areas of highest contrast between light and dark will attract the viewer's attention most, especially if the contrast is on a character, since we naturally look at other people's faces first. So use that to your advantage. Once the boxes are in place, it's time to actually turn them into objects. I think of this stage as sculpting. You're basically carving the boxes into furniture, buildings, or whatever else you need. The most important thing here is cohesion. Everything in the environment should make sense together. In a recent video PCAT made, she mentioned that she thinks of the environment as if it were a character, and I think that's a really good approach. What kind of objects would it need? What details would make it believable? For example, an apothecary's room would probably have a lot of herbs, some books and recipes, and some specific tools they used at the time. A witch's study room would be full of books, potions, and of course, a black cat. It's those details that make the place feel alive. The number one thing to remember at this stage is to have a lot of references for everything. References really make the design process a lot easier. Also, don't overthink it. We're making an illustration after all, not an actual environment design. So just put in what you think is cool and see how it feels. A common problem I personally fall into is that my characters feel like they're just out of place or standing very awkwardly. Your character shouldn't feel confusing to look at. They should also have a very clear purpose in the illustration instead of just standing there. Ask yourself, what is this character doing? When characters interact with the environment, they become a lot more grounded. Basically, the character and environment should feel like they belong to the same world, not like two separate drawings stitched together. So, let's put all of this into practice with one of my own drawings. For this piece, I wanted to draw Link from Zelda in his room cleaning his sword. I start by planning the environment. An adventurer's room filled with items like gear, potions, books, and maps. It's good here to be as detailed as possible. Again, ask yourself, who's the character and what are they doing? From there, you can match the environment. After that, I start gathering references. I want to be very specific in what I like about each image and group them into categories. Otherwise, I find that I drift and start adding way too many images. Then I get into sketching. I actually sketch this off camera because I can't get myself to start a drawing when I'm under pressure, but I'll explain my process. I always start with a perspective grid and try to match what I like about my references. I did 2 thumbnails to test ideas and then I decided to go with this one. After that is just slowly building up the details. You can see that I don't necessarily limit myself to perfect perspective or strictly sticking to boxes in earlier stages, because I know I can do that later. From here, it's really just about solidifying your composition and adding details using references. And after a lot of refining, here's the final result. I tried my best not to fall into the same mistakes I've done in other illustrations. So I made sure that the character had a purpose in this space. I think the composition is good, but my design of the environment isn't the best. Nonetheless, I'm very happy with the outcome. I actually had to stop here because I've been dragging making this video for so long. But I will be finishing it and posting it on my Instagram once I'm done. Environments are insanely fun to draw, but a lot of people avoid them because they may seem too hard. However, if you put in the work and be patient with yourself, you'll unlock a new skill that will transform your art. I really hope that you could benefit and learn something new from this video. I just like to share how I learn stuff to hopefully give you a bit more of a structure in your own studies. If you've been watching my videos for a while, then I wanna say sorry for the very long hiatus. My last video needed to perform well and instead it flopped. And that alongside other stuff made making this video very overwhelming and I really couldn't get it done. But now I'm back, hopefully with more frequent uploads. If you wanna support my videos, you can like and comment. Also follow my Instagram. Thank you very much for watching and I wish you the best. Take care.